This is America, and this is California, one of the most expensive places to buy a home in the United States. According to the latest list compiled by Kiplinger Personal Finance, 5 of the 10 most expensive places to buy a home are right here in California. And with heavy regulations on new building permits and wildfires that have wiped out whole cities, California has one of the most acute housing crises in America. But the problem isn't unique to the Golden State. Low availability and high prices are a problem across the United States. I'll be back with more on that later, but first, let's go to our studios in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, John. Owning a home is the cornerstone of the American dream, but America stopped building, and prices, rents, mortgage rates, they all climbed. Today, the median home costs more than $400,000. Half of American renters now spend more than a third of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. In short, a generation is being locked out of the main way that Americans build wealth, and many are wondering what impact a new landmark federal housing bill that is set to go into effect will actually have.
I spend about a little bit under half of my monthly paycheck on rent currently, and everywhere that we've looked to rent outside of where we are now is as expensive or more expensive. I would love to see more policy surrounding affordable housing, more allocation of affordable housing per apartment building would be really helpful, but also just increases in minimum wage. GC recently upped their minimum wage to about $18 an hour, which will help, but bridging those costs between housing and what we're actually being paid is pretty difficult.
After graduating from college, I got a post-grad job, but I live in Maryland, but like in DC, the rent is just like so expensive, so I thought I would save up and just like live with my parents. I find that it's really difficult to attain the idea of like being self-sufficient and independent because I feel like what I'm being paid isn't really realistic to the, the life of like the cost of living.
You know how difficult it is? It's like you do the right thing. I'm a counselor, she's a teacher, and they don't pay us any money.
Food insecurity on top of my regular bills with energy costs and water and other things. The other elements don't match up with the price of what I'm paying in mortgage with what we need to live. My kids won't be able to do anything with the property if I outlive the time I'm supposed to. We're all going to be under one roof, and it's not affordable for anyone to live or buy anything.
And on the West Coast, the dream of home ownership is also slipping away. Buyers are waiting longer than ever to purchase their first homes, and renters are saying that the cost is putting a major financial strain on them. John Hendren reports from California.
For many Americans, the dream of home ownership is slipping away, a casualty of soaring prices, relatively high post-pandemic interest rates, and a national housing shortage. In California, where wildfires have wiped out whole neighborhoods and regulations to build new homes are strict, it's enough to make some would-be homeowners give up.
I've been renting since 2023 now. I would like to buy a house, but I don't think that's an option in all honesty. Like, it hasn't been an option probably since the 90s.
The median price of an existing home in the U.S. is over $400,000. The average rent is nearly $2,000, a 30% increase over the past 5 years. The National Association of Realtors says there is a national housing shortage of 4.7 million homes. In California, the market's even tougher. The average home price statewide, $775,000, about 5 times the price in 1995. In the city of Los Angeles, it's nearly $1.2 million. Home ownership statewide for Californians aged 34 to 45 has dropped from 67% in 1980 to just 40% in 2021. That's a big reason why California has the highest number of people leaving of any state in the U.S. People like James Pierce and Jesse Rahman.
If we stay long term, I guess we could think about buying something in LA, but I think our plan is to go back to the Midwest at some point just because it's a lot more affordable to live there and to raise a family and to be able to afford property there.
For those who do buy in LA, these days real estate agent Courtney Van Cott says she sees 2 kinds of home buyers. There are first-time buyers getting financial help from family, and then there are the well-off.
The other buyers I'm seeing that are able to enter the market are 2 people with pretty high earning jobs, whether it's doctors, attorneys. The final, demographic I'm seeing would be people who are a little bit older and have been able to save for a lot longer and are more established in their careers.
Unable or unwilling to buy at current prices, many just keep paying the monthly rent. Even many well-paid professionals like physician Samuel Chan.
I think we're fortunate enough to have live in a nice luxury apartment in Culver City, but certainly is at least $5,000 a month. That's, thinking about how long you can keep that going for. It's difficult.
Many here in California and across the U.S. are hoping for a national plan to increase housing so they can own their own piece of America. But without help, for many, going from monthly rent to their own home with a view feels like falling off a financial cliff. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Santa Monica, California.
And here is what Congress is saying is a possible solution.
You don't always hear about Republicans and Democrats agreeing on many major legislative issues in Washington. But the 21st Century Road to Housing Act is one of those exceptions. By vote of 358 to 32, this bill passed in Congress in hopes of helping solve the affordable housing crisis in America. Nearly 1/3 of homeowners and renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Home values have gone up within the last decade, but people's income is not keeping up with those increases. There's also been a spike in mortgage rates and monthly rent within the last several years. Not only are homes more expensive, but there are not enough on the market. Data shows there is a deficit of 4 million homes, and that is where this new legislation steps in. It focuses on boosting housing supply across the country by speeding up the number of new constructions and cutting out delays in the building process. One way to do that is to streamline environmental reviews. This legislation also prevents large investors from buying up too many single-family homes. It's also supposed to offer more access to what's called small dollar mortgages, which helps buyers own homes at a lower cost. The massive bipartisan support shows how important it is to make life more affordable for Americans, becoming a key issue for the midterm elections.
And the housing bill is a bill.
But President Trump already called this new legislation a yawner.
It's a yawn.
And initially canceled signing the bill until he said Republicans passed legislation to tighten voting restrictions. The political tension, though, comes at a critical time when candidates are trying to appeal to voters. But this is only one piece of the puzzle. Solving the housing crisis doesn't just start from the federal level. Advocates say it requires local governments to change their zoning laws and for mortgage rates to stabilize. Matthew Torres, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And joining me now here in the studio is Edward Pinto, who is the co-director of the American Enterprise Institute's Housing Center, as well as Vanessa Perry, who was a former senior advisor at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Ed and Vanessa, thank you both for being with me. This is a remarkable day, Vanessa. This is the biggest housing legislation that we've seen since 1990. How much of an accomplishment by Congress do you think this is?
I think it's a huge accomplishment, if for no other reason than it acknowledges the fact that we have a crisis that is multifaceted, that requires a multi-pronged set of solutions, and that's what the bill does.
When you hear the president talking about this being a yawner, he's said also a big yawn, he has said it is of minor importance. What's your reaction?
In some ways, I understand what he means. I don't know if I would use the term yawner, but the truth is that it is unlikely that we will see immediate impacts of these changes on the housing market and on the crisis that we're currently facing. And so if people are expecting house prices to fall or suddenly there to be a lot more options available in the near short term, that's highly unlikely to happen. It's certainly not going to happen as a result of these changes. So maybe that's what the president means.
I do want to dig into that timeline. Ed, if I could ask simply, we are so used to seeing Congress being dysfunctional and not getting along. Dare I ask, is Congress working now?
I don't believe so. I don't believe...
Even though it was overwhelmingly bipartisan?
That's actually cause for concern. Because this bill has about 40 different sections to it. And so everybody got something. Some people got 2 or 3 things. Congress has a long history. I've been involved in housing finance, particularly looking at the federal side, for since 1974. And I've studied all the bills, and yes, this is the first one since 1990. That tells you something. Congress doesn't get to this very often. There's a lot of reasons for that. We don't have time to go into that. But the chances are, once they pass this, which I think it takes effect without the signature today, once that happens, they're not going to revisit it likely. It could change, but for many years. And I think, as Vanessa said, it's not going to move. I use the term move the needle. I wouldn't call it, the way the president described it, but I just say it's not going to move the needle. There are a couple of provisions that would be favorable. You mentioned some changes in environmental laws, but those only apply to large developments. And we're talking multifamily here. There are very few multifamily developments across the country that this is going to impact. The rest of the items, again, they're pretty much small. There was a mention that, I wrote it down, requires change to zoning. There is no requirement in the bill that requires changes to zoning. There's a little bit of a carrot, but we've seen in the past where those carrots have been offered by the federal government, they've been dysfunctional. So I basically believe this is not going to have the impact that it says it has, fundamentally because the nation has 33,000 zoning jurisdictions in the United States. And it's very difficult to move 33,000. I focus on 50 states, the laboratories of the states, because those you can move, but you can't move 33,000 jurisdictions and solve that 4 million or 6 million. We look at a $6 million shortage number. You can't solve that easily with 33,000 jurisdictions acting independently.
Vanessa, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, it's the local zoning restrictions, many of which were designed intentionally to limit residential density. And they are working against the ability for builders and developers to provide more units. So there's not insufficient supply, persists, and prices continue to stay higher. That is really a local problem.
When you look at what is actually in this bill, it cuts regulation, it eases zoning, and it does try to encourage more building, more supply. Do you think at least the supply will grow out of this?
No.
No.
And one of the ones that's looked to particularly is the removal of, this gets a little technical, the chassis requirement on manufactured housing. So 1974, Congress says, in order to be manufactured housing and use the federal code, which overrode local codes because it was interstate commerce, you have to have a chassis when you build it. You have to have a chassis when you transport it. You have to have the same chassis when you install it. They changed a couple of words in the 1974 Act to say with or without a chassis. Well, two things. A, that has to go through a rulemaking process, which HUD has started, but it's going to take, in my opinion, a couple of years to get that done. The 74 Act mandates how you have to go through it. That's going to take time, number one. But number two, you actually have to have, back to the 33,000, you have to have local jurisdictions that accept these manufactured housing units. And that, a colleague of mine at AI wrote a paper 8 or 10 years ago that said, why is it that manufactured housing is always just around the corner? It's always just over the horizon, and it never gets here. And from my perspective, I think there's some things going on in factory-built housing, but I doubt that it's going to end up being the manufactured housing that is done under the HUD code.
Notably in this bill, it's mainly about reform and deregulation. And Vanessa, there's no spending in this. Is that one of the key elements that is missing here?
So there's a little bit of spending, I believe, with respect to some innovation funds that may be available to jurisdictions who are doing innovative, interesting things to provide new affordable units. But those are limited, so that's not, I don't think, a key component at all. Spending is an issue. I'm not sure where the money is going to come from, but to really solve the supply problem, as Ed mentioned, we're talking about 4 million or 6 million units. I've heard up to 8 million units that are our current shortfall. We will need somebody to help with the cost of construction. Construction costs are high because of rising labor costs, cost of materials. There's transportation and energy costs that have increased. And so as a result of that, it cost a lot of money to be able to build a new housing unit. I think the most recent estimates I've seen, it's about $250,000, and that doesn't even include land. So there's got to be some money that comes from somewhere. And if builders and developers don't believe that they're going to be able to, one, they need land, but they need to be able to overcome these local zoning restrictions and other regulatory barriers in order to be able to do what they do, which is build new units. I've had builders tell me, we'll build whatever you want us to build. We don't care. But one, we got to be able to break even. We got to be able to make money. And then there's also the interest rate issue, which affects developers and investors as well, because they've got to borrow funds for these investments, and interest rates have also increased significantly over time.
Speaking of investors, one of the points that's being debated now is this restriction on what institutional investors can do. And there's a cap of a purchase of some 350 homes. Ed, what impact does that have?
Well, first of all, I think it's misguided what Congress did and what the president proposed. It was,
and this was something that he mentioned at the State of the Union.
Yes, he's talked about it a lot, but I'm saying it was misguided. And the catchphrase was, people live in homes, not corporations. Well, the reality is people are living in all of these rental homes. We've looked at that. And number one, we have found that of low-wage workers that make less than $40,000 a year, that work full-time, 80%, whether they're in rental units, or which includes single-family, whether they're in owner-occupied units, whether they're elderly without any income, whether they have no income, they all have about 80% live in single-family homes, either owner-occupied or rental. Why is that? Well, single-family homes on average have 3.4 bedrooms, and an apartment on average has 1.4. And so you get a lot more people, and the rent difference between a one-bedroom and an apartment and a three-bedroom house is not very much. It might be 40%. So you're getting 3 times the bedrooms for 40% more money, which means you can double up, with the bedrooms. And that's how people are able to live. So back to your point, the Senate passed this. What the Senate passed would have completely and totally killed the large institutional investor business, in my opinion. And that was well understood. The House stripped out a lot of the poison pills. They also provided some exceptions. And I think net, on the scale of 1 to 10, if the Senate bill was going to eliminate it entirely, which I think it would have, I think we're down to maybe a 2 or a 3. It's going to have an impact, but I don't think it's going to have anywhere near the impact that it would have had. And the House bill got accepted and is what's on the president's desk.
One of the initiatives that is making waves is up in New York City. The governor and the mayor of that city have put forward a luxury tax on second homes that will primarily target wealthy individuals who own those homes. There's a $22 billion initiative in New York City to alleviate the shortage of affordable housing. That plan aiming to help working families, but the critics are arguing that it will drive wealthy property owners away from New York City. Our Kristen Salumi takes a closer look.
Mohammed Fatalbab is a licensed real estate agent. He helps clients find a place to own or rent in New York, and it's no easy task.
What's the biggest complaint you hear from people who are coming to New York looking for a place to live?
It's the inventory.
New York is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the nation.
We have an influx of people coming in, but we would love to have more inventory.
The apartment vacancy rate is the lowest it's been in more than 50 years, just over 1%.
So you don't think price is the issue?
Price is an issue, but with more inventory, the price will go down.
Mia Bartolome just moved from Florida.
It's astronomically high here. It's way higher than I pay over there. Most of my paycheck goes to rent, but I guess that's the cost of living in this city, so.
Jason Carrington is saving up to relocate to another city.
Your apartment costs more than what a mortgage would cost. And that's when my problems began. It was like, okay, New York, you're doing a little much now.
New York's mayor recently announced an ambitious plan to address the city's housing shortage called Block by Block. It provides $22 billion to facilitate the construction of 200,000 new affordable homes and also provide maintenance that is much overdue for an existing 200,000 affordable homes. The plan also sets aside $5.4 billion to improve city-owned low-income housing and ease zoning and building restrictions, while mandating rent freezes in almost half of all city apartments.
Combined, these efforts will lead to growth beyond anything New Yorkers have seen in generations. For some, the dream of homeownership will finally be within reach.
The building was built in 1933. This is probably an original pipe, and it corrodes. It has a corrosion like a cancer inside. It doesn't let any water through.
But landlords like Chris Athenios say they too are struggling with rising maintenance, energy, and insurance costs.
No builder, no developer is going to develop housing here if there are rent freezes. Ultimately, developers expect to return on their investment. Property owners like myself, we're always reinvesting money into the building, but ultimately we have to support our families.
And ultimately, when it comes to New York's housing shortage, there is no easy fix. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
So, Ed, from what we know about what's going on in New York, do you think that that's actually going to get people into more affordable housing?
I don't, for two reasons. One is I think it's going to exacerbate the problem that New York City's had for, the data go back to 1990. New York City has had out-migration, domestic out-migration, as it's called, which the IRS tracks from income tax returns.
People leaving.
People leaving, more than people leaving than coming in. So
Right.
it's net out-migration. Has been negative, I believe, in New York City every year since 1990. I could be wrong, but it's virtually every year. In Los Angeles, it is every year. And those numbers are huge. And they, of course, ballooned during the pandemic. So that's problem number one. This action to try to tax people on these second homes is only going to amplify that action. And it's a slow drip, drip, drip. Everybody won't leave all at once. They'll just start leaving this year, next year, the year after. And that is going to wear down the tax base of New York City, both in terms of property tax and in terms of income tax. On the flip side, the money they're spending it on, was it 22 billion?
22, yeah.
22 billion. The history of spending money on subsidized housing in New York City or elsewhere has not been very good. It just hasn't done very well. And we've looked at the entire rental market in the United States, and we've segmented it by the bottom 10% of rents. And the vast majority of those units nationwide are not apartment units. Mm-hmm. They're single-family rentals. Why? Again, back to the 3.4 bedrooms. And so people can actually afford to live much more easily in a single-family rental. Now, New York City's problem, Manhattan in particular, it has no single-family rentals. Why? It's all multifamily. And that's understandable given the density. But even in Brooklyn and Bronx, there's not a whole lot of single-family. Queens has more. Staten Island, of course, has the most. But still, you're looking at, people think of Manhattan, and Manhattan has virtually no single-family.
Vanessa, you've said that there needs to be better coordination between the federal, state, and local levels. Given what we've seen in Congress and given how important the affordability question is to both parties, do you have any optimism that that kind of coordination can happen?
No, I don't. I'm not optimistic. First of all, it's really, really complicated. I mean, the affordability issues have multiple causes, and so I'm not sure how that coordination would work. But there's some things that could happen on the federal level. Now, let's see, assuming that we could lessen some of the pressures on our supply issues, maybe making it easier for people to qualify for mortgages by doing some reforms to the mortgage market, that might be helpful. There's some great things going on with respect to credit scoring that actually might help that. But that's largely at the federal level. At the state level, it's a completely different story. It's more about alleviating some of the zoning restrictions, mostly at the local level. At the state level, there's some incentives that the states could put in place so that the local jurisdictions can do what they need to do. So the coordination piece, I think, is would be challenging, but maybe we don't need all that much.
Yeah, I see you nodding.
So all the things Vanessa just mentioned are what we call on the demand side for the federal government. They create more demand. Well, if we already have 4 to 8 million shortage, you're creating more demand against that shortage. And so we tend to focus on the supply side. How do you get more supply? There are two things that we're suggesting, one of which goes right to the New York City issue. I don't know what the number is for New York City, but I know it's a substantial number. And that is the Realtor.com did a study a year and a half ago that says there are 32 million vacant units in single-family homes. These are basically single-family homes, 32 million vacant units. And it was a conservative estimate. I looked at their methodology. Suffice to say, I thought it was conservatively done. I believe the 32 million number is true. Well, how much would it cost the federal government in tax revenue to say, we're going to have no tax on vacant rooms? Well, if the room's vacant, the federal government's getting zero in tax revenue on that, zero. And it could say, for the first 5 years, it's tax-free. How many rooms would that free up? Based on some analysis from other countries and just thinking about it, I think over 10 years, you could be talking 3 to 3.2 million rooms. Well, that's 300,000 rooms a year. That's not insubstantial. And a bunch of those are in New York City, and they already exist. So the supply impact starts from day one if the government did that. So that's something the federal government could do. The second thing is at the state level. So I was at the National Archives last night, and I was looking at the Declaration of Independence.
Ed, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt. There's obviously a lot more to discuss, and it's clear there's a lot more work to be done. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I'm Alex Marquardt. Thank you from the team here in Washington. Handing back to John Hendren and the team in Doha. Take care.
And don't forget, you can always watch the latest episode of This Is America Monday through Friday at 18:30 GMT or 11:30 a.m. Pacific if you're here on the west coast of the United States. Until then, from all the team here in LA, bye for now.